Good morning, students. Welcome back. This is Dr. B. Tulasi, working as Associate Professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, Vignan Nirula Institute of Technology and Sciences for Women, Palakaluru. In the last session, we have seen second unit. The contents of the second unit are the classes and objects, the nature of the object, relationship among objects, nature of class, relationship among classes, interplay of classes and objects, identifying the classes and objects, importance of classification, key abstractions and mechanisms. These are the topics which we have covered in the unit 2. And in today's session, we are going to discuss the unit 3. And the contents of the unit 3 are introduction to UML, why we model, conceptual model of the UML, architecture, classes, relationships, common mechanisms, class diagrams and object diagrams. And coming to the session, let's start the basics of the unit as usual. Let me start with the question, what is UML? And the name says it's all. UML stands for the Unified Modeling Language. Unified Modeling Language is an open standard graphical notation for system development proposed by Object Management Group. Object Management Group is a consortium of software. The notation is based on work from Grady Booch, James Ramba, Yvonne Jacobson. And UML is a modeling language to express and design documents, software particularly useful for the object-oriented designing. The language can be used from general initial design to very specific detailed design across the entire software development lifecycle. And Unified Modeling Language is a graphical language for modeling and developing of software systems. The UML diagram become a common work product for developers to use to discuss all the phases of the software development. We have seen in the first unit the phases of the software development, and the UML is used for all the phases in the software development. It means requirements gathering and analysis, design, implementation, testing, deployment and maintenance. The goal here is to model the software system before we build it. Unified Modeling Language is a modeling language that combines various approaches in a single design language, which is used to plan and create computer applications. UML is actually a combination of several notations. That means object-oriented design, object modeling technique, which is also known as OMT, and object-oriented software engineering, OOSC. The Unified Modeling Language is a family of graphical notations backed by a single meta model that help in describing and designing software systems, particularly software systems built using object-oriented style. It means by using OOPS concepts. Coming to the next topic, the conceptual model of the UML. To understand the UML, you need to form a conceptual model of the language, and this requires learning three elements: the UML's basic building blocks, the rules that dictate how these building blocks may be put together, and some common mechanisms that apply throughout the UML. And once you have grasped these ideas, you will be able to rate UML models and create some basic ones. As you gain more experience in applying the UML, you can build on this conceptual model using more advanced features of the language. Here, you can see the conceptual model of the UML. Here, the conceptual model is divided into three types. These are building blocks of the UML, rules, and common mechanisms. Coming to the building blocks of the UML, the vocabulary of the UML encompasses three kinds of building blocks. They are things, relationships, and diagrams. The things are the abstractions that are first-class citizens in the model. Relationships tie these things together. Diagrams group interesting collections of these things. These things are the basic object-oriented building blocks of the UML. You use them to write well-formed models. Coming to the things in the UML. There are four kinds of things in the UML. There are structural things, behavioral things, grouping things, and annotational things. Coming to the structural things. In the structural things, the classes, interfaces, collaborations, use cases, components, and nodes are seen in the structural things. Coming to the behavioral things, interactions, state machines are seen in the behavioral things. Coming to the grouping things, here we will discuss about the packages. Next, coming to the annotational things. These are the nodes which are used to represent the comments, exclamations of the model. Coming to the next one, relationships in the UML. There are 4 kinds of relationships in the UML. They are dependency, association, generalization, realization. These relationships are the basic relational building blocks of the UML. You use them to write well-formed models. Next one is diagrams in the UML. A diagram is the graphical representation of a set of elements, most often rendered as connected graphs of vertices. It means things. We have seen 4 types of things: structural, behavioral, annotational and grouping things. By using these things, and the paths, those are nothing but the relationships. So tying the things and relationships together forms the diagrams. You draw the diagrams to visualize a system from different perspectives. So a diagram is a projection in a system. In theory, a diagram may contain any combination of things and relationships. In practice, however, a small number of common combinations arise which are consistent with the 5 most useful views that comprise the architecture of the software intensive system. For this reason, the UML includes the 9 kinds of diagrams. They are class diagram, object diagram, component diagram, use case diagram, sequence diagram, collaboration diagram. Sequence and collaboration are the isomorphic diagrams, state chart diagram, activity diagram, deployment diagram. These are the 9 types of diagrams which we are going to study in our next chapters. Coming to the next one, rules of the UML. The UML's building blocks can't simply be thrown together in a random fashion. Like any language, the UML has a number of rules that specify what a well-formed model should look like. A well-formed model is one that is semantically self-consistent and in harmony with all its related models. The UML has a syntactic and semantic rules for names. It means, first one is coming to the names. What you can call things, relationships and diagrams. The name which we are going to give for the things or relationships are diagrams. Next, coming to the scope. The context that gives specific meaning to a name. And next, coming to the visibility, how these names can be seen and used by others. Next one is integrity, how things properly and consistently relate to one another. Next one is execution, what it means to run or stimulate a dynamic model. These are regarding the rules in the UML. Next one is common mechanisms in the UML. Coming to the common mechanisms, a building is made simpler and more harmonious by the conformance to a pattern of common features. A house may be built in the Victorian or French country style, largely by using certain architectural patterns that define those styles. The same is true for the UML. It is made simpler by the presence of 4 common mechanisms that apply consistently throughout the language. Those are specifications, adornments, common divisions, extensibility mechanisms. This is regarding the conceptual model of the UML. Coming to the rules of the UML. The UML's building blocks can't simply be thrown together in a random fashion. Like any language, the UML has a number of rules that specify what a well-formed model should look like. A well-formed model is one that is semantically self-consistent and in harmony with all its related models. The UML has syntactic and semantic rules for names. It means what you call things or relationships and diagrams. Next, coming to the scope. Scope means what is the time or how much time the thing or a relationship or diagram is active. It means the context that gives specific meaning to a name. Next one is visibility. Coming to the visibility, how those names can be seen or used by the others. As I told you that we have some visibility rules like public, private, protected and packaged. And next coming to the integrity, how things properly and consistently relate to one another. And next one is execution, what it means to run or simulate a dynamic model. Next one is models built during the development of a software intensive system tend to evolve and may be viewed by many stakeholders in different ways and at different times. For this reason, it is common for the development team to not only build models that are well formed but also to build models that are elided. It means certain elements that are hidden to simplify the view. We need to hide some elements so that it will simplify the view. We need to simplify the complex model to look in a simpler way according to the grading huge. So we use this elided. Next one is incomplete. Incomplete means certain elements may be missing in the model. Then we can say that is incomplete. Next one is inconsistent. The integrity of the model is not guaranteed. Then we call this as an inconsistent. These less than well-formed models are unavoidable as the details of the system unfold and churn during the software development life cycle. The rules of the YAML encourage you but do not force you to address the most important analysis, design and implementation questions that push such models to become well-formed over time. This is regarding the rules. And coming to the next one, that is common mechanisms in the YAML. A building is not made simpler and more harmonious by the conformance to a pattern of common features. A house may be built in the Victorian or French country style, largely by using certain architectural patterns that define those styles. The same is true of the YAML. It is made simpler by the presence of 4 common mechanisms that apply consistently throughout the language. Those are specifications, adornments, common mechanisms, extensibility mechanisms. Coming to the first one, specifications. The YAML is more than just a graphical language. Rather, behind every part of the graphical notation, there is a specification that provides a textual statement of the syntax and semantics of that building block. For example, behind a class icon is a specification that provides a full set of attributes, operations, including their signatures also. What the signatures means, we'll see in the classes topic. As of now, you just remember it as an operations and behaviors that the class embodies. Visually, the class icon may only show a small part of this specification. Furthermore, there might be another view of the class that presents a completely different set of parts and is still consistent with the class's underlying specification. You use YAML graphical notation to visualize the system. You use YAML specifications to state the system's details in detail. Given this split, it is possible to build up a model incrementally by drawing diagrams and then adding the semantics to the model's specifications, or directly by creating a specification, perhaps by reverse engineering an existing system and then creating diagrams that are projections into these specifications. Okay. The YAML specifications provide a semantic backplane that contains all the parts of all the models of a system, each part related to one another in a consistent fashion. The YAML's diagrams are thus simply visual projections into that backplane, each diagram revealing a specific interesting aspect about the system. This is regarding the specifications. It means we will give all the details, complete details about the systems. Then that is nothing but the specification. The name itself indicates specification. It means all the details about the system. Next one, coming to the adornments. Generally, adornments means the decorative parts of the system. So, coming to the adornments, most elements in the YAML have a unique and direct graphical notation that provides a visual representation of the most important aspects of the element. For example, The notation for a class is intentionally designed to be easy to draw because classes are the most common element found in the modeling object-oriented programming. The class notation also exposes the most important aspects of a class, namely its name, attributes and operations. Attributes are nothing but the properties of the class, and operations are the performed on this particular class, and name is the unique name used to identify the class. A class specification may include other details such as whether it is abstract or the visibility of its attribute and the operations. Many of these details can be rendered as a graphical or textual adornments to the class's basic rectangular notation. If you see the figure here, transaction is the name of the class. It is not having any attributes. The second compartment in the class tells about the attributes of a class. The third compartment of the class indicates the operations. Here we are having some operations. The figure shows a class adorned to indicate that it is an abstract class with two public, one protected and one private operation. It means if you see the figure here, the plus sign indicates execute and rollback indicates the public operations, and minus timestamp indicates the private operation, and hash priority indicates the protected operation. So this is regarding the adornments. Every element in the UML's notation starts with a basic symbol to which can be added a variety of adornments specific to that symbol. And coming to the next one, that is common divisions. In modeling object-oriented systems, the world often gets divided into several ways. So, if you see the figure here, first there is a division of class and object. So, if you see the figure, graphically the class is represented as a rectangle with three compartments. And the first one indicates the name of the class, and second one is the recording the attributes of a class, and third one is the operations. And one more optional compartment is there that is used to represent the responsibilities of a class. And when you come to the object is nothing but a rectangle, and the name of the object is represented by underlining the name. That is nothing but the object. Here, if you see the figure, the first there is a division of class and object. A class is an abstraction. An object is a one concrete manifestation of that abstraction. Graphically, the UML distinguishes an object by using the same symbol as its class. As I told you, so class is having three compartments: name, attributes and operations. And then simply the object is by giving the same name as the diagram as rectangle with the underlining the object's name. So here we will underline the object name. This is the only difference between the classes and the objects. In the figure, there is one class named customer, tagged with three objects: John, which is marked explicitly as being a customer object. It means he is the customer. So that is represented by using a colon customer. An anonymous customer object. So and Alice, which in its specification is marked as being a kind of customer object, although it's not shown explicitly here. And almost every building block in the UML has its same kind of class object dichotomy. For example, you can have use cases and use case executions, component and component instances, nodes and node instances. Here, the object is nothing but an instance of class. So, the dichotomy is class and object. If you take use case, it will have use case executions. If you take component, it will have component instances. If you take node, it will have node instances. This is regarding the separation between the class and the object. Second one is there is a separation of interface and implementation. An interface declares a contract and the implementation represents one concrete realization of that contract, responsible for faithfully carrying out the interface's complete semantics. In the UML, you can model both interfaces and their implementations. Here, if you see the figure here, it is having a figure which is having three interfaces with the names I, unknown. I indicates the interface, and spelling wizard, I spelling and I dictionary. Here, in the figure, there is one component. Here the component is represented with the spelling wizard.dll. Okay, that is used to represent the .dll indicates the component, and I indicates the interface, and that provides two interfaces, I unknown and I spelling. This also requires an interface, I dictionary, that must be provided by another component. Almost every building block in the UML has the same kind of interface implementation dichotomy. For example, you can have use cases and the collaborations that realize them, as well as operations and the methods that implement them. So this is regarding the second point. Coming to the third point, there is a separation of type and role. The type declares the class of an entity, such as an object, an attribute, a parameter. A role describes the meaning of the entity within its context, such as class, component, or collaboration. Any entity that forms a part of the structure of another entity, such as an attribute, has both characteristics. It derives some of its meaning from its inherent type and some of its meaning from its role within the context. If you see the figure here you are having a ticket order customer person. Here we are telling about the part with the role and the type. So here the role is nothing but the customer and the type is a person. This is how we are representing the third one. There is a separation of type and the role. So first one is between the class and the object, and second one is the interface and implementation, and third one is the separation of the type and the role. This is regarding the common divisions. And coming to the extensibility mechanisms. The UML provides a standard language for writing software blueprints, but it is not possible for one closed language to ever be sufficient to express all possible nonsenses of all models across all domains across all the time. For this reason, the UML is open-ended, making it possible for you to extend the language in controlled ways. The UML's extensibility mechanisms include stereotypes, tagged values, constraints. So, coming to the stereotypes. A stereotype extends the vocabulary of the UML, allowing you to create new kinds of building blocks that are derived from existing ones, but that are specific to your problem. For example, if you are working in a programming language such as Java or C++, you will often want to model exceptions. In these languages, exceptions are just classes, although they are treated in very special ways. Typically, you only want to allow them to be thrown and caught, nothing else. You can make exceptions first-class citizens in your models, meaning that they are treated like the basic building blocks by marking them with an appropriate stereotype as per the class overflow. If you see the figure, here we are having a overflow that is indicated by exception. That is nothing but the stereotype. So stereotype that is represented by exception, that indicates the overflow. So if you want to indicate the other basic building block, then you can use this stereotype as an exception. So next one is coming to the tagged values. Tagged value extends the property of the UML stereotype, allowing you to create new information in the stereotype specification. For example, if you are working on a shrink wrapper product that undergoes many releases over time, you often want to track the version and the author of a certain critical abstraction. Version and author are not primitive UML concepts. They can be added to any building block, such as a class, by introducing new tagged values to the building block. In the figure, for example, the class event Q is extended by marking its version and author explicitly. So if you see the figure, you can see the tagged values. They are represented by using flower brackets, by using the author name and the version. You can represent in the basic building block. Though they are mandatory to represent, you can use them by using these tagged values. A constraint extends the semantics of a UML building block, allowing you to add new rules or modify the existing ones. For example, you might want to constrain the event Q class so that all additions are done in order. As figure shown, you can add a constraint that are explicitly marks these for the operation add. Collectively, these three extensibility mechanisms. What are these three extensibility mechanisms? First one is stereotype, second one is the tagged value, and third one is the constraint. By using these three extensibility mechanisms allows you to shape and grow the UML to your project's needs. These mechanisms also let the UML adapt to new software technology such as the likely emergence of more powerful distributed programming languages. You can add new building blocks, modify the specifications of existing ones, and even change their semantics naturally. It's important that you do so in controlled ways so that through these extensions, you remain true to the UML's purpose, the communication of information. This is regarding the rules and the common mechanisms of the UML. We have covered all the topics of Unit 3, and let's have a quick recap what we have seen in this Unit 3. In this unit, we have discussed about what is UML. The UML is a language for visualizing, specifying, constructing documentation. Why use UML? What is the main purpose of using UML? What is a model? A model is a simplification of reality. Why do we model? And what UML is not? Objectives of the UML, history of the UML. We have seen the principles of the modeling. In that we have seen 4 points. Next we have seen the object-oriented modeling. The two most common ways are from an arithmetic perspective and from an object-oriented perspective. That's what we have discussed here. A conceptual model of the UML. Here we have discussed about the building blocks of the UML. In the building blocks of the UML, we have seen the vocabulary of the UML encompasses 3 kinds of building blocks. Those are things, relationships, and diagrams. And coming to the conceptual model, we have seen the building blocks and the rules and common mechanisms. We have seen the architecture of the UML, and this we have seen about the 5 views of the architecture. And next we have seen the software development lifecycle, and this we have seen about the 4 phases: inception, elaboration, construction, and transition. And we have seen about the workflows also. Next we have seen the classes. In the classes, we have seen about the attributes, operations, and responsibilities. Coming to the common modeling techniques of the classes, we have seen the how to model the vocabulary of a system, how to model the distribution of responsibilities in a system, and modeling non-software things, modeling primitive types. This is what we have discussed in the classes. Next, we have seen the relationships. In the relationships, we have discussed about the dependency, generalization, and association relationships. And we have seen the common modeling techniques. In the common modeling techniques, we have seen about the modeling simple dependencies, modeling single inheritance, modeling structural relationships, and creating web of relationships. This is what we have discussed in the relationships chapter. And coming to the common mechanisms, in this we have discussed about the nodes, stereotypes, tagged values, and constraints. So, in the common modeling techniques, we have seen about the how to model the comments, how to model new building blocks, how to model new properties, how to model new semantics. This is what we have discussed in the common mechanisms. Next, we have seen the class diagrams. In the class diagrams, we have seen the what is a class diagram, and in the common modeling techniques, we have seen the how to model the simple collaborations, how to model the logical database schema, and what is forward engineering, and what is the reverse engineering, how our tools are supporting, and is our code supporting or not for the model which we have generated. Next, we have seen the object diagrams. In the object diagrams, we have seen about what is an object diagram, and next in the common modeling techniques, we have seen to model the object structure. Next, we have seen the same what we have studied in the class diagrams also, that is nothing but forward and reverse engineering. For all these chapters, we have seen the tips we need to follow while modeling a system. And coming to the next part, which is very interesting part, that is quiz. So, in the quiz, what type of relationship is represented by shape, class, and square? If you see the figure, it is having 4 options: realization, generalization, aggregation, and dependency. So, find out the answer. If you see it clearly, you can see as generalization. Next one is, which diagram in UML shows a complete or partial view of the structure of a model system at a specified time? So here we are having 4 types of diagrams: sequence diagram, collaboration diagram, class diagram, object diagram. For this specified time, it means instance. For instance, we need to use this object diagram. Which of the following is the building block of UML? So, coming to this, things, relationship, diagrams, all of the mentioned. We know that conceptual model of the UML consists of building blocks of the UML, rules and common mechanisms. Coming to the building blocks, here we are having things, relationships and diagrams. So, the answer is all of the mentioned. Next, classes and interfaces are part of structural things, behavioral things, grouping things, annotational things. The answer is structural things. What is the physical element that exists at runtime in UML? The options are node, interface, and activity, none of the mentioned. The answer is node. Which things are dynamic parts of UML models? Structural, behavioral, grouping things, annotational things. So, dynamic parts represents the behavioral things. Which of the following term is best defined by the statement? A structural relationship that specifies the objects of one thing are connected to the objects of another. This is association, aggregation, realization and generalization. We know that the semantic relationship is done by using association. Aggregation represents the whole part and realization is a collaboration property, and generalization means it represents the superclass and subclass relationship. So here the semantic relationship is nothing but the association. So coming to the next one, object-oriented analysis and design can be handled by one who knows UML. So if we know the UML, we can handle object-oriented analysis and design. No, the option is, we are given true and false. The correct answer is false. At conceptual level, class diagram should include operations, attributes, both operations and attributes, none of the mentioned. At the conceptual level, it is enough to have attributes only. Next, what is an object? We all know that object is an instance of class. An object includes encapsulation of data. An object is not an instance of class, all the mentioned. So, object is an instance of class. UML interfaces are used to specify required services for types of objects and program in Java but not in C, C++ or Smalltalk. Define executable logic to reuse across classes. Define the API for all classes. The answer is specify required services for types of objects. And next, how many diagrams are there in Unified Modeling Language? 6, 7, 8, 9. So the option is 9. What are they? Class diagram, object diagram, use case diagram, collaboration diagram, sequence diagram, state chart diagram, activity diagram, component diagram and deployment diagram. So we are having 9 diagrams. What are the common mechanisms of object diagram? So object diagram is used to represent the object structure. So before I giving answer, if you can answer these questions, I think you understood the class well. If you have any doubts, go back and play the videos. If you think that I'm going a little bit fast, don't worry. Then play the video slowly. It means, hope you people know how to play the video slowly. So if you don't know, I'll give you an idea. Just go to the settings in the YouTube. Click on the settings. You'll have a playback speed. You'll have an option known as playback speed. In that you'll be having normal and 1.25, 1.5. If you want to go slow, then go for 0.75, 0.5. If you want to go fast, then go for 1.25, 1.5. So by doing this, you can customize the speed according to your need. So thank you so much. Let's meet in the next session. Till then, have a safe day. Follow SMS. As usual, sanitizers, masks and social distancing till we get the vaccine for the corona. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.